I, Scott Blackwood, always knew she'd come from inside the woods. I had known it since I was a boy. I grew up in Massachusetts, but moved to New Hampshire when I was 26, upon realizing that Lynn didn't belong to me anymore. In fact, it never had. I never belonged to Lynn. Massachusetts was supposed to be a state of coastal marvel. But when I saw the call signs of gangs spray painted on the new Lynn Harbor Park, just a day after it was open to the public, I knew it was time to go. I moved to a town north of Ossipee, New Hampshire, and started training under a carpenter. All I could afford was a trailer in the woods, something which resembled an escape pod crashed down in a clearing in the woods on the side of a dirt road. My closest neighbor was about a 7-minute walk away, and the town's population was 1,500, and I had never felt safer. I have glasses and angular features. My hair is brown and a tad spiky, never one to obey a comb. These are the features that were designed for she who'd come from inside the woods. Slightly below average eyesight in my frame, strong enough to carry the pallets, Wayne, and I picked up on the side of the road, were not the results of genetics. These were predetermined factors. I was designed for her. My looks and personality were not the results of my environment or even my development in the womb, but a result of what would happen to me in the quarter of my life. This is to say, I was who I was because I was who she wanted. It might creep some people out, living alone in a trailer in the middle of the woods, but I found it endearing. I embraced the smell of bug spray and stood outside on summer nights to look at the stars. But it was when the nights started getting colder and the leaves started turning auburn, orange, red, and brown that I started knowing she'd come from inside the woods. It was as though she had been hibernating since my childhood, and it would take a gradual decline in temperature to wake her up, to prime her, to charge her. That Massachusetts stink would have to wear off me for a little bit in order for her to catch my scent, as she had caught it when I was a kid. Ever since I moved, I think I always had an inkling, a subconscious instinct that she was prowling around and waiting. How Aurora walked to the spindle. You can imagine my luck with women in Lynn, Massachusetts. You can imagine most people's luck with love in the 2020s, so you can imagine my sedentary relief when I sensed her outside in the woods. Wayne was the master carpenter I was apprenticing under, and there were plenty of dilapidated farmhouses, shacks, and lopsided screened-in porches in Ossipee, Albany, and Tamworth. No house had a bad view, even if the view was just the neighbor across the street. Our drives from client to client weren't bad on the eye either. Wayne was talkative, and I liked listening to him on drives to and from Conway. He invited me over one night to try out his wife's cooking. Her sense of humor completely bulldozed me, and I ended up laughing so hard at the dinner that I almost cried. We ended that night by having a couple of beers outside while Wayne and his wife talked about a black bear, which once broke into the house. My Massachusetts stories could not compare to theirs. Here was this couple which spent their lives in the fairy tale that was New Hampshire, and I love listening to them. How dark and black the tree line was at night. Standing in the floodlights of the garage was akin to standing between civilization and what there was before civilization. It was outside of Wayne's house and outside my trailer where I was reminded of a feeling I had circa elementary school, trick-or-treating as a kid. See, I've never had a warm October growing up in Massachusetts. I remember going as a clone trooper from Star Wars one year, and as Batman another one. Batman with a blue cape, the superior Batman, of course. Mom walked my sister and I up the street usually around 7, and it would get cold with the wind, not making the temperatures any warmer. Dry leaves would scratch along concrete, and my fingers would border on numbness. But there was this promise of sweetness in that cold air. It was dark too, in the middle of the street, a darkness unfamiliar to children. All this combined into a threatening, daunting, but delightful feeling that only happened once a year. And I blame Halloween for my premonitions of her. Cold, dark fingers, numb, starless night sky, blue and gray. Probably what it looks like in a clamshell. But back then it was Mom taking me out into the darkness to go and get sweets, and recently, having not trick-or-treated in 15 years, 5 or take, it had to be me going outside to wait for the sweets to come to me. After all, night in October still made my fingers numb. I grew up and outgrew trick-or-treating, but autumn nights never changed. Oh, but I never believed I needed a costume for her. Oh, that trees only grew to keep her hidden long enough for our love to stew. They grew so tall because she'd be just a little shorter than me. I can't explain how or why I started to know that she would come for me, that she existed, that she was there. But that breeze which tried freezing the Massachusetts suburbs I grew up in was more than just a chill. It was a chill that was more than just a chill. It was her perfume, night's cold forest smell, where all vegetation gives up and green becomes something tangible enough to smell because the frost forces its last breath. The pine tree loses their color green and becomes black backdrops of the night. All that's cold of night returns to her. The cold night which slithered up my sleeves and right into my skin, instilling goosebumps, was more intimate than a goodnight kiss. It was her preparing my body for herself. Perhaps she needed me composed of goosebumps. Perhaps she needed me shivering so that she could warm me. Perhaps she needed me encased in everything night and autumn time provided. I felt so bride-like standing outside, waiting for a night after cold autumn night. If I looked up at the black pine trees enough, if I let my fingers go numb long enough, if I stood outside in the cold long enough, then she would come get me. I was being primed for her, my cold soulmate. My soulmate was the cold manifest. For what a rush that was, the cold invading the suburbs and tossing dry leaves around. Every Halloween outing was but a premonition of our matrimony. And when I went to bed on those nights, walking back into the warm trailer, I would fit myself into the cramped compartment in the side of the wall, just big enough for a slim mattress. And I'd imagine her breaking into the trailer. I'd imagine all the green fever dream lights of the woods coming into the trailer through the curtains, and her being a silhouette crossing the kitchen towards my sleeping compartment. I would be lulled to sleep with these fantasies. There would be so much sunlight inside my trailer when I woke that it was almost as though she had entered in the night, watched me sleep and left. How the birds chirped and how that one blue jay couple chased each other past the window. It was as though they were harbingers of our destined matrimony. So one night in mid-October, after Osippe's second frost and before a rainstorm that meteorologists were predicting to come in 2 days, she came from inside the woods. It was a couple minutes after 9. I knew immediately when my fingers felt white, when my fingers felt pallid. I heard ahead the brush become disturbed. It felt as though my nails receded into my knuckles. My calves trembled, not from fear, but from temperature. And that temperature provided such a predatory massage. She was coming finally. She walked out of the woods. Her hair was platinum blonde, as though dyed by the stars, and she was wearing a lilac purple top. She was by all accounts a normal woman, aside from what magnetic draw I felt towards her. Her face was unassuming and almost angular, like mine, but was punctuated with doe eyes that contradicted everything unassuming about her. They were dark Sicilian eyes. Oh, that ground of orange pine needles was made for her to tread across. My thought glided across the ground, projected out from the fathomless tree line in front of me. I might have been too prematurely entranced when she approached. Her eyelids were winged in black. She wasn't for me. I had no property over her, but I was her ultimate property. All this quiet and frosty elegance had domain over me. She was the beauty where I could forfeit myself. Finally, she crossed the blueberry patch at the tree line and walked into the light being emitted from my trailer. And here this features premiered. She came within a yard of me, and her face displayed an innocence I was not expecting. She was not dominating. She didn't have to be, for she knew her mere existence was what dominated me. She said my name and said, "Come with me." So I followed her into the woods because I had waited all my life to enter the cold woods with her.